All right, strap yourselves in, because today we're going deep on something pretty wild: time travel.
Time travel?
Yeah, we've all seen it
Right.
in the movies, people jumping into DeLoreans or phone booths and zipping through history. But what if I told you that today's deep dive is about an interview with a hypnotist, and their subject is talking about time travel experiences?
It does sound like a sci-fi movie.
Right.
Yeah. This is from a Spanish language YouTube channel.
Oh, wow.
So we are working from a translation here,
Okay.
which I think makes it even more fascinating, don't you think?
Totally adds a whole other layer to this whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And before we get into it, I do think it's important for everyone to know that we're coming at this with a completely open mind, right? We're not saying that we believe this person or don't believe this person. We're just exploring the ideas that they're talking about and seeing what kind of thought-provoking stuff we can pull out.
Absolutely.
So are you ready to do this?
Let's dive in.
Okay, let's dive in.
Right away, the interviewee kind of throws us for a loop by talking about time as a flow of energy.
Okay.
But this energy, they say it, is structured, but it's also experienced differently by everybody.
So not the linear, TikTok kind of time that we think of.
Right.
Like sometimes I feel like a day's just flying by, and other times it feels like it's taking forever. Is that just a feeling, or is there actually something to that?
Well, yeah, think of it like a river. We all know that a river flows in one direction, but the current speed is going to change depending on how wide the river is, if there are rocks in the way, things like that. Maybe time is similar, it has a direction, but the way that each of us experiences it can vary.
So you're saying our perception of time is not actually fixed?
Yeah.
That's kind of blowing my mind a little bit. And speaking of blowing my mind, this person actually goes on to describe techniques for time travel, which I have to say at first made me really skeptical.
I can understand that it is a pretty big leap.
It is?
But they talk about two ways to do it. Using portals, either natural or artificial, and the other way is consciousness transfer.
Consciousness transfer.
Which is even weirder.
Okay, I'm listening.
This one involves projecting your mind into a body in a different time period.
Okay, now that is straight out of a sci-fi movie plot.
Right.
But then I started thinking, haven't I heard physicists talking about things like wormholes,
Right.
which are like theoretical tunnels
Yeah.
through space-time?
Exactly. And then there's quantum entanglement, which is this really bizarre thing where two particles can be linked no matter how far apart they are.
Right.
And if you change one, the other one changes instantly. Could that be the key to this consciousness transfer?
Oh, that's interesting.
It's really fun to speculate.
It is. So we got portals and mind swapping. Yeah. But wait, it gets even wilder because the interviewee claims that people can accidentally time travel
What?
without realizing it.
Really?
They said it might feel like you're missing time or having a really vivid dream. Have you ever had one of those weird experiences where you can't account for a period of time?
I'd have to say yes. I have a few.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder.
It does. But if people are just popping in and out at different times, wouldn't that create some serious chaos in our timeline?
Absolutely.
So then what happens?
Right. What are the consequences of all this supposed time travel?
Right.
Well, according to the interviewee, even a tiny time travel event can create these ripples and branches in the timeline, leading to infinite possibilities.
Infinite.
Yeah, infinite. And they even mention the many worlds interpretation.
Ah, the many worlds interpretation.
Yeah. Do you know about that?
Of course, it's this mind-blowing idea from quantum mechanics that says that every decision we make splits the universe into a separate reality for every single choice.
So every time someone time travels.
Potentially a whole new branch of reality.
Okay, now that is seriously trippy.
It is.
We're talking about infinite universes here, but let's reel it back in and talk about some specific things that the interviewee brought up, like the Philadelphia experiment, that alleged military experiment where they were trying to make a Navy destroyer invisible.
Yeah. Well, this interviewee says that the experiment didn't just make the ship invisible, it caused what they call a temporal collapse.
A temporal collapse?
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
I don't know either.
But they said it was throwing people into different timelines and all these crazy side effects.
Wow, so there's more to that story than we thought.
Right, and then there's this story of Sergei Ponomarenko.
Sergei Ponomarenko.
This guy apparently shows up in Ukraine in 2006, but with documents from 1950.
Wow.
He claims that he was taking pictures of a UFO and somehow got transported to the future.
That's amazing. What's really interesting about his story is that he supposedly had pictures of this UFO.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of adds another layer to it. Does this actually lend credibility to his story?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But with all this talk about time travel and potential chaos, I have to wonder, is anyone trying to control any of this? Like, are there governments secretly involved? I mean, I imagine the power they would have if they could manipulate time.
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? And the interviewee actually talks about seeing military personnel during some of their experiences with time travel technology.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which really does make you think, is there something more going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, like a whole lot more than we realize. All right, so let's say hypothetically that I could time travel. What are the risks besides accidentally erasing myself from existence, which would be a real bummer?
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. The interviewee actually talks about some pretty serious risks like cellular deterioration, mental instability, and like you said, you could even cease to exist altogether. But one of the things that they highlight as super dangerous is meeting your past self.
Ooh, yeah. I've heard about something about paradoxes, right? Like
Hmm.
if you go back in time and accidentally prevent your grandparents from meeting, you're never born.
Yeah, that's the grandfather paradox.
Not a pretty bad family reunion.
Definitely. It's one of those classic thought experiments about the chaos and the unintended consequences of time travel.
It really does make you think that if we ever figure out how to do this safely, there are going to have to be some very strict rules.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So time travel might not be all sunshine and rainbows. It sounds like there's some serious risks involved. But even with all of the dangers, there's still something undeniably cool
Yeah.
about the idea of exploring different timelines.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, like imagine going back in time to witness history firsthand, or maybe even getting a glimpse of the future.
That would be amazing. But for now, I think we're going to have to stick to exploring these ideas through scientific theories and interesting interviews like the one we're talking about today.
Well, before we get too lost in the what-ifs of time travel, let's actually take a look at what the interviewee says about how our everyday experience of time is affected by our thoughts and emotions, and even our consciousness. This is where it gets really interesting and potentially a lot more practical for our listeners.
Absolutely. This is where the conversation shifts from the theoretical to something a bit more tangible.
I like it.
Let's dive into that in part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay. See you in part 2.
Picking up where we left off last time, the interviewee talks about how easily our perception of time is affected by our thoughts and emotions.
Oh.
You know, people who are always rushing, always focused on the future, they end up feeling like time is just slipping through their fingers.
Yeah, like they're living in fast forward,
Exactly.
constantly worrying about the next thing and missing what's happening right now.
Right.
I've definitely felt that way sometimes, like I'm just racing through life and not really appreciating it.
Yeah, it's a common feeling in this fast-paced world we live in.
It is.
The interviewee uses this really interesting analogy of a fast-paced freeway to describe that way of experiencing time.
A freeway?
Yeah, like everyone's zooming around all stressed out and their perception is all distorted by that speed and the chaos.
Okay, I can see that.
So it's no wonder they feel like time is escaping them.
Yeah, that's a really vivid image.
Yeah.
I can definitely relate to that feeling of being on like a never-ending freeway. But is there an off-ramp? Can we actually slow down our perception of time and start experiencing life more fully?
Well, that's the hopeful part, the interviewee says that we
Okay.
can.
Yeah.
They talk about the importance of becoming more present focused, more mindful.
Right.
It's not about like ditching all your responsibilities or becoming a hermit or anything like that,
Right.
but it's more about shifting your mindset, just approaching your daily activities with more awareness.
So instead of rushing through my to-do list, constantly checking my phone and worrying about what's next, I should just be focusing on the here and now.
Yeah, basically.
That sounds a lot easier said than done.
It does. It takes practice.
Yeah.
But they believe that the benefits are totally worth it.
Okay.
They talk about people who have managed to slow down and it's like they've stepped off of that metaphorical freeway and onto a peaceful walking path.
Okay.
They're not caught in that rush anymore, so their perception of time expands and they start to appreciate the simple things again.
It's like hitting the pause button on life for a second and just taking a breath. But how do you do that in a world that's constantly pushing you to go faster and do more?
Yeah, it's tough. The interviewee really emphasizes the importance of being present in each moment.
Okay.
So, like, whether you're working or spending time with family or friends or just enjoying some quiet time alone,
Yeah.
you just bring your full attention to what you're doing in that moment.
So really savor that first sip of coffee or feel the warmth of the sun or really listen to a friend's story without letting your mind wander.
Exactly. All of those are ways to be more present.
Okay. I like it. And
Yeah.
just by practicing that, you could start expanding your perception of time and experience life with more depth and richness.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like a recipe for a more joyful existence.
It really does.
But let's get back to some of the more mind-boggling stuff.
Okay.
The interviewee mentions encountering these
Your
entities.
entities.
Yeah.
Entities that they say interfere with human consciousness, particularly when we're stressed or unconscious. That kind of freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah, it's a pretty intriguing idea and a little unsettling too, right? Like, does that mean that our thoughts and emotions and our energetic state could make us more susceptible to outside influences?
Especially when it comes to things like time travel.
Right, exactly. It's like sometimes when you're feeling scattered and ungrounded, it seems like anything could happen.
Yeah,
Maybe it's not just a feeling.
maybe not.
And they even suggest that these entities might be able to manipulate our unconscious ability to time travel using our scattered energy.
Okay, so not only could we be accidentally time traveling, but we could also be bringing some unwanted passengers along for the ride.
You got it.
That's enough to make you want to double check your luggage.
For sure. It definitely adds another layer of complexity to this whole idea of time travel.
It really does, and it makes you think about how important it is to be aware and really have some discernment in our lives, especially when we're talking about things like time travel.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
So we've talked about the crazy science of time travel, the risks, and even the idea of accidental time travelers. But one of the things that really stuck with me was what the interviewee said about the potential consequences of time travel. They talked about cellular deterioration, mental instability, even the complete erasure of your existence. That's some seriously scary stuff.
It is. It makes you think that if we ever do figure out how to time travel, we're going to need some very strict guidelines.
Yeah, like a rule book.
Right. It's like opening Pandora's box. Once you unleash the power of time travel, who knows what could happen?
Exactly. But even with all of the risks and the potential chaos, there's something really alluring about the idea of exploring different timelines, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like imagine witnessing history firsthand or getting a glimpse into the future. The possibilities are kind of endless.
They are, but for now, we'll have to be content with just exploring these ideas through thought experiments and things like the interview that we're talking about today.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll all be hopping into our own time machines and taking these incredible adventures through time. But until then, there's one more interesting thing from this interview that I want to unpack.
Okay. I think I know what you're talking about, the idea that time travel isn't just about technology, but it's also about our own personal choices and actions, right?
Exactly. And that's where we'll pick up in the final part of our deep dive. All right, so we talked about all that mind-bending science and time travel, the risks, even the idea of accidental time travelers.
Yeah.
But what about what the interviewee said about our own choices
Yeah.
and how those affect time travel? That's where things start to get really interesting, like kind of philosophical,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big shift from all that external technology stuff to something a lot more personal,
Right, and they're saying that by being more aware and really making conscious choices, we're not just shaping our own lives, but maybe even influencing the future of humanity.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's not just about building a time machine, it's about our actions every day. Are they saying that we're all time travelers in a way?
In a way, yeah, they emphasize that every choice that we make sends out these ripples,
Wait.
into time.
Ripples.
Yeah, and creating all these different possibilities and shaping the future in ways that we can't even imagine.
So kind of like the butterfly effect. Like
Yeah.
one small change can have a huge impact somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta admit, it's hard to wrap my head around that idea.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
But think about it this way. Imagine dropping a pebble into a pond, the ripples spread out, and they affect the entire surface of the water.
Right.
Our choices are like those pebbles creating these ripples in time.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So even small choices can have an impact that goes way beyond our own experience.
Exactly. It kind of adds a whole new level to that idea of personal responsibility,
Yeah.
If every choice we make sends those ripples out, shaping the future for us and for other people, we have a much bigger responsibility for what we do than we might realize.
That's a big thought.
It is.
But it's kind of empowering too, right?
Well,
Like if we really can influence the future by the choices we make, then we can create a better world.
Exactly. And I think that's really what the interviewee is trying to get across.
Okay.
If we line up our actions with our values, with what we want to see in the world, maybe we can steer the course of time without even needing a time machine.
So no DeLorean needed.
Maybe not.
We can all be time travelers just by making good choices in the present moment.
Exactly.
That is a pretty amazing takeaway.
It is.
Well, this deep dive has been a wild ride.
It has.
We've talked about mind-blowing science, philosophical ideas, the risks and the allure of time travel, and we've come away with some really interesting things to think about.
And we've learned that we still have so much to learn
We do.
about time and consciousness and how it all connects.
If there's one thing that we've learned, It's that time travel is full of mysteries, paradoxes, and possibilities, whether it's real or not. It's something that just captures our imagination and makes us think outside the box.
And it reminds us to keep asking questions and stay open to the wonders of the universe.
And who knows what amazing discoveries are waiting for us out there.
Right.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive, but we want to hear from you. If you could travel through time, where would you go, and what would you do to stay safe? Share your thoughts with us on social media, and until next time, keep exploring.